All right, good afternoon. It's 3 o'clock. I think we'll call the Subcommittee on Tax Revision to order. Appreciate everyone being here. I know it's later in the day and we've had a lot going on, but got some important bills to have a hearing on. These will be hearing only for today, first hearing. I'm going to start with HB 347, Representative Fleming, and you can bring whoever you need to with you. Come on up to the table and we'll get started.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. I have with me today Matt Frick, who's with BI Production Works out of Madison, Georgia. So House Bill 347 addresses the rental car vehicle definition and code, and also adds language regarding rental trucks. Short-term rental vehicles without a driver are covered by full sales tax in Georgia. In addition, rental vehicles are constantly moved in and out of use, and their owners pay TAVT and ad valorem at each purchase of these vehicles. Effectively, this results in a duplicate taxation, which is both unfair to the taxpayer and limits the growth of these businesses across the state, entitling these rental cars in Georgia. Recognizing this, the legislature adjusted the TAVT rate for rental vehicles a few years ago to collect sales tax several years. The revised rate keeps the sales tax revenue the same, but provides a deduction in the TAVT tax paid at the purchase of the vehicle. The results in the rental cars can be based, titled, and rented in our state without these punitive taxations. Under current Georgia law, short-term truck rentals without a driver are subject to full sales tax at 8%. Additionally, these rental vehicles are frequently cycled in and out of use, resulting in the payment of full TAVT and ad valorem at each purchase of each one of these vehicles. This essentially results in that duplicate taxation, which that they pay to the counties and to the state, and inhibits the growth of their business. So what we're trying to do with this bill is we're seeking to modify the existing provision to include these types of vehicles operated, specifically trucks, large trucks that Mr. Frick will discuss with y'all in lines 15 through 21. The bill would simply expand the rental car provision to cover these types of vehicles in question here. Full sales tax would be collected at each transaction, each time they're rented, over the term of these vehicles while the company owns it. And the reduced rental car TAVT would apply at the purchase. There would be no reduction in the state tax revenues as a result, and impacted local governments, Morgan County specifically, we've talked to, and they are fine with this piece of legislation that would potentially affect their tax revenues. So in order to be able to pay the reduced ad valorem, a business would need to meet three standards that are listed in these lines 15 through 21. One, the vehicle must be manufactured or significantly modified at a manufacturing facility that is based in Georgia and employs Georgia residents. Two, the vehicle must be used for a purpose for which full sales tax is collected on that vehicle at the time of rental. And three, the vehicle must be rented without a driver to another business. What this does is it helps avoid the inclusion of any direct-to-consumer rentals in the transaction. We've worked last year. We talked to the Department of Revenue on this language. They helped with the language to help address this issue and to make sure there's no additional, hopefully unintended consequences. And if I could, Mr. Chairman, I'd like Mr. Frick just to speak for a minute on exactly what kind of vehicles we're talking about and what they do, because I know there's been some questions about significantly modified, what that means, and we might need to define that more. But if you're good, I'd like to give Mr. Frick a minute if there's any
Sure.
questions.
No, let's go ahead and we'll hold the questions maybe and then get back to the author in a second. Yeah, please introduce yourself and tell us who you're with. And
Thank you very much. My name is Matt Frick. I am with Bugesh Investments, BI Production Works there in Madison. We started out close to 10 years ago as a dry cleaner. We were a dry cleaner. We had some customers in the movie industry, and they needed some extra help with vehicles. We started
say the name of the business or the
Bugesh Investments. It's BHUGESH.
Investments.
Mm-hmm.
And it does, and your company does.
BI Production Works is what we do business as, and we do leases of equipment and motor vehicles, mostly in the film industry, but some in the construction industry as well. The specific purpose of this bill is to get trucks treated like regular motor vehicles. Like if you went to us to rent, let's say an Expedition or some other kind of car that your employees needed to rent. We're able, because it's a rental facility, we're able to get a tax advantage of paying 1.25% when we buy that car from a dealership. We're trying to get trucks treated the same way, because what we're doing right now is we're paying 6.6% TAVT every time we buy a truck. We're using it, renting it out at 8% sales tax every single week it's out. And then when we sell it again after 2, 3, 4 years, there's another 6.6% TAVT when we sell it as well. And so what we do with it when we have it, typically what we're doing is we're buying the truck, it'll have the cab on it, and it'll just be the chassis is empty. There's nothing there, it's just the bars of steel on the back. What we actually do to it, we put an entire box on it, or we put a flat bed with stake beds on the back, perhaps a generator on it. So it's significantly changed, is what it says. But we're actually enclosing it sometimes and making it so that it's useful for our customers, whether it's for cameras or for wardrobes or for anything else that might be needed.
All right, thank you. We do have a few questions. Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Fleming, maybe I should have just saw you in our office and asked you this question there, but don't have a fiscal note yet. Are we working on that, or do we have an estimate?
Yes, sir, Representative, we are. I actually talked to Chairman Blackman this morning about it. They've been working on the fiscal note for a few weeks now. Talked to House Research this morning. We still don't have it back, but I addressed that with Chairman Blackman this morning as well, coming into the meeting.
Got it, great, thank you.
One question I have, you said significantly modified, but then you said maybe a flatbed or something. As far as compare the price of the truck versus the price of the significant modifications, is there obviously there's a range, I'm sure.
There is a range. And so depending on the type of truck and what we're turning it into, I would say if you're looking at percentages, it could be anywhere from 15% all the way up to maybe 30% value. So for a stake bed, which is just going to be a flat bed with something covering up the cab as well, that might for a truck that costs maybe about $70,000 new or $80,000 new, that modification might take 15 or 20,000 depending. For trucks that are going to be enclosed with lift gates on the back and everything like that, that could be an expense of about 40,000 depending on what all changes are doing. So that could be about 30% on those larger trucks, which MSRP on those is typically 110, 120,000.
Thank you. Chairman Martin.
Yeah, question to the chair, but maybe the gentleman knows, or maybe the attorney. U-Haul, they buy trucks, they rent them out just like this with no driver. Do they pay tax? Do they pay TAVT on their vehicles? Do you know?
No, sir, I don't. I think we've had that discussion.
We have had that discussion. So one of the benefits that these big national companies have is they can buy their trucks in any state they want to and license them in any state they want to. A lot of states don't have any TAVT tax on rentals, so they go to those states. There's a few neighboring us that we could do this in and not have to pay any TAVT when we purchase the vehicle. So that's what they're doing. They're going to some of these.
You would
other
pay
states.
sales tax though, and you'd pay sales tax if you purchased the vehicle.
They would pay some sort of tax, but if they are a rental agency, a lot of times these states have exceptions for rental agencies because they recognize they're going to be making sales tax every time it's rented out, but they're not collecting the TAVT upon the purchase. But Georgia right now doesn't have that benefit.
Well, I go back to the question, and I don't know that we're going to find the answer today, Mr. Chairman, but my question is, regardless of where U-Haul buys the truck, if the truck is titled and it has a tag in Georgia, they pay TAVT, unless there's an exemption. And that's my question: are we creating, because there's not a large carve out in what doesn't pay TAVT here. We're just adding paragraph B, and I'm just seeking to find out if we would then be treating these specific vehicles different than we would. I mean, there are other small businesses. I pick U-Haul, but it could be Representative Fleming's Halls or us, down there or something. So I'm just trying to find out if we're treating these vehicles different than we treat others, or do we have a situation where one is paying tax on a vehicle and then charging tax on the rental? I'm not bothered, and I'll get this, isn't it true? I'm not bothered by the fact you have to pay TAVT again when you sell it, because everybody does that. I mean, that comes with it. But I understand your point. If we don't tax, if we're trying not to tax inputs, that's one thing. But we're carving out a very small group of people that may rent a vehicle for inputs. So I'd just like to have the answer to that question as we move forward. Again, I see what the gentleman's trying to do. I just want to, why just for you and not for other people that are paying TAVT on the inputs of their lease if they are then charging tax on the lease?
Well,
Does that make sense?
It does, yes, thank you. And so the only difference is going to be this could be for any company, you're right. Any company that wanted to go out and buy a truck chassis and modify the back of it so that it can be used for a U-Haul, they could go out and do that. That's right.
But they might buy a truck and not have to modify it and rent it out. Mm-hmm. And we would still be charging them TAVT.
That's right.
Yeah, so that's what I'm getting at here is that you've crafted it for your benefit, and I appreciate that. But I just if we're missing,
I think we're skipping over something. If you're buying a truck that you're renting it out, correct? You are included in that 1.25% TAVT carve out that already exists.
Okay, well that's what
The difference is that the DOR cuts that off for medium and heavy duty vehicles. And so if you're renting out a pickup or even a smaller truck like that.
Well, I understand, but I mean, and again, I'm not trying to break your proposition. You may have pointed out something where we're taxing inputs and outputs. Mm-hmm. I'm just suggesting that if you have pointed that out, this may be drawn too narrowly to actually properly affect and take care of the problem that exists. I mean, I understand you're drawing it for your particular instance, and my suggestion is it might need to be a little bit larger, but just a question for the future.
That's why we have first hearing. Chairman Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you for bringing the bill, Representative. My question is, again, back to clarity, and you just touched on it. Remind me, so the rental cars, they pay rental car companies pay a reduced TAV.
That's correct.
The law tax.
Currently, if you're a rental car concern, is the way it's stated in the law, you pay 1.25% TAVT upon your purchase, as opposed to the 6.6.
Okay, but you said that's in the current law, that's only for light. Private passenger vehicles and light vehicles.
That's right.
Would that include the 15-passenger vans?
Those are included.
Okay.
The law stated, I believe it's 15 less.
Oh, yeah, it's right there in 13. Okay, thank you.
Representative Fry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just have a real quick question. I know you've calculated what your potential savings would be on this. What's your volume of vehicles that you're buying, and just to give us an idea of what we're looking at?
So in the past year or so, and I'm sure you're all aware, we went through a strike in our industry, in the film industry. So we didn't buy as many as we normally do, but we still had a lot on order that we had already agreed to purchase, and we had to purchase them. So in the past year, we paid about, for these large trucks, almost $500,000 in TAVT. That's stuff that could have really helped us float that strike. We were in bad shape, I'll say that. We were in bad shape. So, but we were paying about $500,000 for TAVT for these trucks specifically. And so that adds up to maybe, these trucks are all close to 100, maybe a little more each. And so you're not looking at too many trucks to make that up. Less than 100 different trucks to do that. When we're looking at how much sales tax revenue we're generating for the state and for our county, we're the largest tax payer in the county, more than Walmart and Lowe's combined. We're the largest one. And we're contributing, $5 million, $6 million, $7 million, $8 million a year, depending.
In your sales tax?
That's right.
That's sales tax on rentals.
That's on our rentals. That's right. So when you're looking at cost benefit, that plays into the ability of us to grow and produce that sales tax revenue.
If I may?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, sir. What states would you be referring to that potentially you could title your vehicles in and rent them out in Georgia?
So there's some benefits in New Jersey, New York. There's some benefits in Illinois, Montana, Wisconsin, that area.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Seeing there's no more questions. By the way, is there another? Obviously, this is carefully tailored to limit the number of, obviously like the 15 and under passenger vans, and for some reason, medium and heavier duty trucks are exempted from this rental. This would add them into rental vehicle. If you didn't have these, the requirements there on lines 17 through 21, are there a lot of other companies that would want to utilize this, that rent trucks and would want that favorable treatment on the TAVT?
It very well could open the door for them. We were concerned, obviously, looking at fiscal notes and considering the state's budget, not wanting to have a huge impact on anything. So we were trying to make sure that it was narrowly tailored for our productions. However, this could work for anybody. Anyone who wanted to go out and buy a truck and start a business renting out larger trucks to construction companies or to any other B2B operation could do this.
I will say, Mr. Chairman, over the past year, I dropped this last year, but I've had a few other companies that have reached out and people, businesses across the state that this would benefit as well, that might not do any stuff, trucks or vehicles pertaining to the film industry, but other industries in Georgia as well.
I will say your TAVT tax of $500,000 sounded impressive until you told me your sales tax.
They run a good business.
That's I'm like, well, yeah, most counties would trade $500,000 for $5 million. Representative Fry, did you have a follow-up?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm just curious, I may be totally missing it. Where is it that we're talking about big trucks if it defines it as any motor vehicle?
When you significantly modified is where it does, right?
So one of the problems we're only changing this definition. In other provisions, it is required to be a motor vehicle that carries passengers and is used for the purpose of, and that we went through the DOR trying to get these included and they wouldn't allow it. Designed for the purpose of carrying passengers. These trucks, they say, are not designed for the purpose of carrying passengers. These are large trucks. They're used for moving stuff, not for moving people. And so right here, this is how you would allow a larger truck. It doesn't have to be something designed for moving people. It could be, or anything that's been significantly modified in a facility in this state.
So it could be a really large truck.
But it could also be a
Potentially.
smaller truck, Mr. Chair, I think.
Or
I mean, I'm not seeing a
Golf cart, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not seeing a real definition. We're talking about big trucks. I'm not seeing a real narrow definition on that, just to bring that up for
Yeah.
consideration.
I'll say this, so if you're talking about really small trucks, mini trucks or stuff like that, those oftentimes don't even need tax, right? So often, I don't even know that they pay TAVT, they might pay sales tax.
One last question I think we brought up at the beginning, or maybe you did, Representative Fleming, about the term significantly modified.
Yes,
and
sir.
we heard 10 or 15, 30%. Obviously, have you considered some sort of a tightening up of that definition?
Yes, sir. Like I told you before the meeting, Mr. Chairman, I think we can tighten that up with some additional language here to define that better.
Seeing no more questions and seeing this is a first hearing, thank you guys for being here. And
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, all
look forward to
committee.
working with you. Now we'll going to call Chairman Noel Williams up, and we'll get started on House Bill 1115, LC 50. It's a substitute, LC 500735S.
I've got the law firm of Bauer, Sox and Handel representing here.
We'll get you on either side, sir.
Mr. Chairman, we're talking about LC 50073-5S. And this is a flexible option sales tax that we worked on this summer. Chairman Blackman and Trey Rhodes, Trey Kelly had a lot of input in this, and basically we're trying to simplify things, and hopefully that is what we're going to figure out after our 2 meetings, and we get everything perfected. We have the guardrails and everything ready for it.
All the buzzwords.
But anyway, I'm going to hit the highlights, and then we can get into the meat of the legislation. Basically, old cap provisions are going to phase out. We're going to have new cap provisions that come in. The new cap allows for a 3% local in total, but it really is 5 cents because we are not going to include the E-SPLOST and the T-SPLOST. These are not going to count toward that 3%. But when you count the E-SPLOST and the T-SPLOST, and that counts towards, so you're talking about a total of 5 cents. And right now, the state of Georgia is a total of 4. And we're going to try to have most from 8 cents and below. But there will be some like Augusta that has your convention center. And so anyway, we're creating a new local flex sales tax, if you will, restricted to only capital expenditures, property tax relief, or both. So if a community wants to do some kind of capital outlay or project, instead of having a tax rollback, then they can use that money to help with the infrastructure for that said community. This tax cannot exceed the 1%, but can be levied in fractions of up to 1%. The tax cannot be levied for more than 5 years before another referendum is required. And obviously this is going to require a referendum, and these votings are going to come on pertinent dates. It's not going to be just something in the middle of the summer where nobody knows about. The details of how this tax is used and shared between cities and their county must be included in the local legislation required before this optional sales tax can be voted in on a local referendum. And that's basically the meat. The meat of this bill is going to be eligible in all 159 counties or districts. And with that, I can turn it over to Dante or Ryan if you want to add anything to this.
Go ahead, just introduce yourself and position. Thanks.
Sure. Thank you. My name is Dante Handel, Governmental Affairs Associate with ACCG. So good afternoon, Chairman Newton, members of the committee. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. So under the existing 2% cap, there are far more exceptions to that cap than there are sales taxes that actually apply under it. So we have that 4% state sales tax cap. We have this 2% local cap, but we have jurisdictions as high as 9%. There's one county that's at 9. Vast majority are between 7 and 8%, and I think there are 2 counties that are still at a 6% combined sales tax rate. So what this bill would do is kind of clean up the code, make it a lot more clear what all falls under that. It would remove the restrictions against combining and mixing and matching certain ones. So under current law, you can't have both a host, the homestead option sales tax, and a lost local option sales tax. It's an either or. So this legislation would remove that restriction. And then when it creates that new flex penny, that would apply under the 3% cap. And as Representative Williams mentioned, the only ones that wouldn't would be E-SPLOST, because the E-SPLOST is in the Constitution, so it would take a constitutional amendment to subject that to the cap, and then up to 1 penny of the T-SPLOST types to encourage transportation. And then I would say that currently SPLOST and LOST are the 2 most common sales tax types that apply under the cap. We see those in about 150 counties. There's some overlap there, so very, very popular, and I would be glad to answer any questions from the committee.
Chairman Blackman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the presentation and all the work that the 3 of y'all and others have put into this. I think one thing I was just going to make sure that you mentioned is that we've had a number of one-offs where they have to go before the entirety of the General Assembly, and this creates an avenue for local delegations to approve this flex penny on a limited basis, essentially, and it rolls all those one-offs up under this new 3-cent cap. So where we have made several exceptions. These pull those exceptions back, simplify the code, and then give some local delegation the ability to put some of these initiatives forward if their local municipality or entity wishes them to do so. Did I say anything wrong there?
No, sir.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Sharing one remote here. Ryan Bowersox with the Georgia Municipal Association. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, we appreciate your attention to this today. We appreciate all of Chairman Williams and Chairman Blackman's work on this issue. Chairman Blackman, exactly as you said, I think a lot of communities have come forward and recognized the need for an additional sales tax within their community to meet various needs, whether this is property tax relief, whether this is specific capital outlay projects. And the idea before would allow for the local leaders within that community, the county, the cities, to work with their delegation to try to, within this new framework, design something that would be specific for their community to meet their needs, and then go to their voters and ask them whether they would like to approve this additional sales tax for the needs that they're outlining for a specific period of time. So.
Quick question either for the bill author. I know we had a discussion on a recent different piece of legislation where a municipality and a county was able, I don't know the nice way to put it, it seemed like to hold hostage a vote or a particular referendum. Does the language in this bill, like on 146 through 156, somewhere in there, does that anticipate that ability to where it goes on and designates the proper way of municipality within a, and somebody else on the committee may know. Yes, yeah, Chairman. Just one we had discussed recently. I didn't know if that got incorporated into this, that difficulty that a single county might have had with a small municipality with very small numbers.
Sorry. Yeah.
Dante, we talked about the DOR.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Chairman Newton, thank you for the question. So thinking about this, I think the language on those lines that you pointed out comes from the Lost Law. We're talking about absent municipalities. That issue that was addressed in Ways and Means this morning under House Bill 946 was kind of applying some of those same elements to single county T-Splost. This bill, as written, wouldn't affect that. That new single county T-Splost bill new single county T-Splost law, were that bill to pass, would still function as it does under 946. It just wouldn't be subject to that 1% cap. That would be one of the two exempt taxes.
Vice Chairman Gaines, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I know you mentioned, I believe there's one county that currently has 9%, and I think, is that Columbus?
Yes, sir.
So under this, and is that maxed out? I mean, is 9% currently the highest you could go? So under this bill, what would be the highest you could go? 11? Still be 9?
Yeah, you want to go ahead?
Thank you, Chairman Gaines. Yeah, yes, it would still be 9. This would not impact some of those communities that have reached that 9% if they are operating an E-Splost, and then 1 penny for transit. So a Columbus Muskogee would fit under that framework that they are able to retain their 9% right now, but they would not have access to this new penny, which is being granted because they have been capped out at that point.
So 9% is the
That is it.
max.
Mm.
Chairman Knight.
Thank you. First of all, Chairman Newton, would you get your phone out and take a picture? Because I think we got ACCG and GMA at the same table. I know relations have gotten better over the years, but I've seen years where
We appreciate that.
they were, they were not quite
Got to celebrate
as
small
friendly.
victories.
No, thank you. And again, to my friend, and this may be more for the folks flanking you, and I've been over here a long time, but I think as I go back and read this, we need to get a handle on what we have. And from a point of view, I think you've done a pretty good job of talking about what we have. But it may be helpful in a graph or in a way of exactly, state for currently what we have or what's available. so we can talk about these things and we can actually sort of see where they are. And that may help the committee from a point of view of a little more information there. I don't, that may be something that would be helpful for.
We could have that ready for the next meeting.
Yeah, but I guess my other question goes back, and again, along the lines of, these intergovernmental agreements and, splitting this. And you had mentioned that it would be in the local legislation to us to split. So is that really giving the authority to the delegation to make the ultimate determination or make the only determination? How is that working? Because I know my county coming in from last year, or my county and my city, major city coming in from last year, it was about to go to war over the split. And I foresee maybe some potential problems there. I don't know how we're trying to solve that or lessen the tension between the city and counties.
Yes, sir. And there's been a few different versions floating around, so I'm not exactly sure of the substitute today. Some of the idea that's being envisioned is that almost similar to the process of the regional T-SPLOS, where the delegation and local leaders come together and discuss these issues. It would require an intergovernmental agreement between the county and at least 50% of the cities representing 50% of the population, and then would require the local act. So it'd be almost a 1-2 step of the IGA and then the local act having another layer of approval upon the distribution.
So let me make sure I understand, or maybe you're answering it in a different way. Does the local delegation have final say-so, or are they dependent upon what is the intergovernmental agreement?
They would have, my understanding of the draft, they would have the final say over approving the intergovernmental agreement through the local act to allow the tax to proceed. So one would require the other at that point, so that they would look at the intergovernmental agreement, and if they agreed with what the local communities were asking to do, they could then pass the local act. But again, the delegation would then have the ability to say, we disagree with what you have agreed to. We don't want to proceed in this manner. Try again.
Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to specifically ask you, because this is something we've kind of talked about, I guess the 10 years that I've been on Ways and Means, is flirting with this idea of allowing you to collect more sales tax and use it to offset property taxes. But we've never really found a way to do that. To say, if you're collecting the revenue, how do we so tell me how that would work mechanically for property tax relief.
Yes, sir. Similar to those language, that provision was modeled after loss, where you would take the proceeds of last year's and roll back the millage rate, from my understanding, of the next year. And so you would be looking at turning essentially the revenue collected in the previous year that was distributed to your local government if it was for property tax relief, and then be offsetting the millage rate in the next year. And again, if as this is only a 5-year tax, with the local delegation needing some say in the reapproval, you would be then able to look at how the local government utilized the funds that was provided, and it would also, again, every 5 years need to go to referendum if it were to be approved again. So a little bit of some safeguards there in the manner that the local government uses the funds would have some review after the tax is coming up for expiration if they are seeking renewal.
So where is that in the bill where it talks about the rollback?
Dante, do you have that?
I know I had significant input on this with Chairman Williams, but I'm just trying to refresh my memory as well. I really don't know. Is that, I may have found it. Is that sort of like line 312?
Yeah.
How about line 324?
It just says you have to offset it.
Is that the part you're looking for?
It doesn't say a rollback.
Oh, it doesn't have to say
It just
rollback.
says you have to offset it. It doesn't say how. That's in the local act, how you can do it.
Okay.
Somebody want to speak to that? Sure. There you go. Right there's fine. Right there's Clint.
Clint, you could use those there.
So on the flex penny, it says if you're using it for property tax relief, that it has to be shown on the property tax bill. But the way you do it is open to how you want to design it in your local act. In other words, with lost, it's a specific way you have to roll it, do a millage rate rollback. But we decided in the flex penny to leave that flexible because you all, the delegation may want to, instead of doing a millage rollback, you may want to do a flat dollar amount off the bill. You may want to do a percentage off the bill. It's got to be shown on the bill, but it's not prescriptive in here as to how do you roll it back? Is it a millage rate rollback, or is it a dollar amount off or a percentage off?
But we could require it to guarantee that whatever is collected would go back.
So you would put that in your local act. So you would say, if let's say you decide your flex penny is going to be used for property tax relief. Again, it's only for 5 years. You would have to put something in your local act saying, okay, this is going to be a reduction of the millage rate. That's how we're going to do it. And you got to show our millage rate was 10 mils, and because of this tax, you got 3 mils off the 10 mils. Or you may say, instead of doing it the millage rate, you may say everybody gets a certain percentage off their bill, whatever you can, like the HTRG, remember that was 18,000 worth of assessed value off. So you could do it that way. It's not detailed in how you give it in this legislation. It leaves it up to you all through the local act to determine how it's shown on the tax bill. But it does have to be, you do have to show it on the tax bill. You get to decide how it's shown on the tax bill.
Okay, we can talk some offline about it as well.
I got several people lit up.
To follow up to that specific point while we're on it, but I'll yield to.
Go ahead, Chairman Martin.
To the author or any of the folks up there. So going back to lost or going back to all these things, I mean, the reality of it is when you say show it on the tax bill, is they mark up the loss rollback, they mark up the gross millage, and the people say the same amount. They really didn't roll back the taxes.
Right.
And that's, I think, what Representative Kelly here is talking about. I mean, you have a gross millage of 10, you had a loss of, rollback of 3, so you're paying 7. So then you implement another tax, so your loss rollback is now 4. You still pay 7, and they just bump the gross millage to 11, and the taxpayers never know what hit them. So when we say you have to roll back your millage, you put it on there, but then you raise the gross millage. That's the concern that I have. I believe that's what the representative was having always. It's the net number that comes out of the taxpayer's pocket. That's important to the taxpayer, not the gross number, because I'm going to leave it to my cities and counties and boards of education to set their millage. They have a lot on their plate. But let's be honest, saying that you increase the lost rollback does not mean the net millage rate goes down, because in my experience, it just doesn't. So what makes this bill allow another penny, allow another fraction of a penny, allow something to really hit the bottom line for the taxpayers, so they're paying less money because they're paying it in transactional tax.
So that's specifically why we didn't put the lost rollback formula, which is in current law under loss. That's why we didn't put it in this flex penny, because we didn't want that situation to happen. This allows you all to design it so it doesn't have to be, so you can't game the system where you raise the gross millage and then net it back down to last year's millage rate. Here you can do it differently than that. You can just show the dollar.
You can, but you're not required to. That's what I'm getting at. I believe that's what Representative Kelly was getting. You can do it that way,
yes,
but you don't have to. And if you're the local governing body, you're going to do it so that it looks like it's not as big. I mean, again, they may need the money. I'm not going to get into local issues, but I think if you're going to give them the ability to have this transactional tax, to lower the millage rate or lower the cost of property ownership, the ad valorem tax bill, then it can't be. You can do it either way. One where it's not so direct and one so it is. I mean, we've got to prescribe. This has to be against the number to lower the amount that comes out of the taxpayer's pocket, both business and personal.
So we were thinking that the delegation be a check, because the delegation has to pass this, so the delegation wouldn't accept anything that they didn't think was going to flow through to the taxpayer and be able to be gamed. But I understand your point, and if that's it and y'all want to be more prescriptive, we were just trying to provide maximum flexibility, because like the HTRG grant that you all gave this past year, that was $18,000 off of assessed value. So whether you lived in $1 million house or you lived in a $200,000 house, you basically got roughly $500 off your tax bill. So everybody got the same. That's one way to do it, right? Another way would be percentage. Obviously, $1 million house, percentage-wise, we get a whole lot more dollar-wise off. So we were trying to give you that flexibility to decide how the tax relief is given, because you can give tax relief differently. But if you want to be very prescriptive about it, it's just going to limit the type, how we distribute that tax relief across all property taxpayers. You're going to say, I want it done this way. Does that make sense? See, there's different ways you can do it now, which divvies the benefit up differently amongst taxpayers. And you can leave it open-ended for you all to make that decision in the local act. Or if you don't want to leave it open-ended, then yes, you could get very prescriptive and say, no, it needs to be done specifically this way. This is the way I want you to give the property tax relief. And the local act can't change that.
Let me go on to a few other questions. Representative Fry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Y'all, I just want to be clear, we're not necessarily removing any sort of authority from the municipal and the counties it's only for this, what do you call it? Flossed?
Penny.
So it's literally only for the flossed. So I don't recall having to get together with my colleagues to do a splost or an e-lost.
Doesn't come through the General Assembly, those don't.
But this is the only one that would be subject to our local delegation. So in theory, the locals could say, hey, look, we're going to put this bill in. We want you to remove everybody's property tax, and if you want to do it, then you call for a referendum if that's what you're going to do. Is that correct?
So on the flex penny, they've got to go through the delegation, right? Now, if they want to give property tax relief without going through the delegation, they still have the other types of pennies available to them. They could still do lost and host. Those are the pennies you all currently have out there that are designed for property tax relief. They give it in different ways, but those would be the ones you wouldn't need to go to the delegation to put on the referendum if you decide to go that route.
Right. So with the flossed, you would have to go through the local delegation. Local delegation could drop a local bill that says, hey, we want to drop this bill, and then offer to the municipality or the county, hey, we dropped this. If you want to call a referendum to lower property taxes, go for it. That's an applicable use, isn't that correct?
I think the local act sets up the referendum. So I'm trying to think through, could you authorize it, but then leave it to the county or city to decide if they want to utilize it or not? That's your question, right? So we authorized it, but if you guys decide not to hold the referendum, then that's up to you. I haven't thought about that. Do you have any thoughts on that? I'm not sure if you can do the local act, but then leave it to the local governments to actually have the referendum.
As written, I don't think that's kind of how it's designed, but also as written, it should already potentially have the input from the local jurisdictions through the IGA piece, and so you'd almost know ahead of time there's an interest from the local governments before it kind of comes to the local act to be passed.
But I'm just wondering if a delegation could have that authority to force a referendum on it.
I think you could. I think you could force it. I think we had a situation recently, wasn't it? Some delegation passed a referendum, and then the locals decided not to hold the referendum.
That's exactly what I was asking. So, I mean,
Yeah,
we could, point is, and we got some pretty high property taxes over in Clark County. If we all got together and said, hey, look, we're going to do this. We're going to do the referendum for a floss locally, but y'all got to use it to reduce property taxes. what you're doing is you're allowing local delegations to force the counties to lower the property taxes, which I'm not saying is bad or good. I'm just making a statement. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're letting the
Certainly.
delegation put it directly instead of the county or the city, and then the citizens ultimately get to decide it. But
That's part of a referendum. Chair. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
But it does take away the authority of the municipalities and the counties for the flossed. Am I right?
it could, yes. I mean, I think most delegations are gonna wanna defer to the local governments and do it at their request, but
Since when? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Chairman Stevens.
Still trying to think through some of these scenarios. SPLOST, of course, is strictly for capital projects. Could this flex penny, and I don't want to interrupt that, but could this flex penny potentially, we've had this year after year when folks say we got to, use some of this money for M&O, which can become permanent. Is that a possibility that this flex could be used for county M&O instead?
the way it's drafted, not the way it's drafted right now, it's for property tax relief or capital. There's no authorization for M&O, but it could be changed, obviously, for that. But remember, it's a temporary 5-year tax, so if you use it for M&O, you got to decide how are you going to replace that revenue if the tax doesn't you don't reauthorize it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So going back to the property tax question, and I know Spencer or Representative Fry brought up the question, could the local delegation do this even without the approval of local government? So let's go down that path. Let's say in Clark County, where we do have high property taxes, we pass the FLOST, and what would stop the local government, even if we put it in the act that they had to put on the bill that they was rolling back the millage rate X, what would stop them from still increasing the millage rate? We can't control their millage rate. So unless we can, in our local act, control their millage rate, then there's no way to enforce this.
Yeah, they could offset the tax relief by just raising their millage rate.
Right.
Unless you can figure out a way to keep the other. I mean, there's got to be some political backlash for that if they raise their millage rate.
They do it every year.
They got to announce
in Clark
tax
County.
increase and go through all of that. But
I mean, I see it. I don't think I've ever seen us in Clark County actually roll back the millage rate the whole way. So I just, if we were to pass this and we went down that path of actually trying to provide property tax relief, I would be stunned if they didn't still raise property taxes.
I think, and I don't know if we have anybody in here from Macon, but I want to say that in the Macon second loss tax, don't they have something in there to keep the millage rate from going up or something in there about that? So you could design it like Macon did theirs, I guess.
That's what I was buzzing in to talk a little bit.
Yeah.
Chairman Blackman.
Macon Bibb designed one that suits them that, I believe does have sort of a clawback. If Representative Washburn here, he could talk a little bit about it. You designed a C-SPLOST, I think that, fit the needs of your community. We've had more and more come at us with these kinds of things. So, if there was something that fit Clark, or, based on, it wouldn't have to go to full General Assembly, provision, you're able to do these same kinds of things that are coming, before the entire General Assembly, but do it before the local delegation. And you could put whatever restrictions that, the entire General Assembly has been putting on these one-offs, if that helps at all.
Yeah, I think you could do it through the local act. You could put a restriction that while you're collecting this tax, there's some sort of a limitation on raising that millage rate during that time. Again, I'd have to look at what Macon did, but I know they put something like that in Macon because they were concerned about the same thing, that they would just raise the millage rate.
But, Mr. Chairman, wouldn't this kind of defeat the purpose if we start doing all these one-offs? Weren't we trying to simplify it and get it, more simple? So,
but I believe you could go ahead.
Yes,
Chairman.
sir. That's exactly, you're exactly right. And if I didn't make that clear with my explanation, that was the whole idea, is that we you still have a local obligation
Local
to
flavor.
craft something, within those parameters. And that's the whole idea of that flex. Obviously, there are some guardrails on this, as it pertains to what an extra penny could go towards, so that, we can ease into this.
Right, right.
If in fact it was the will of, of the committee and beyond to do something along these lines. But that was all your work this past session. So I don't mean to steal your thunder.
No, heavens, no. It's a big team.
Representative Fry, you had a follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a point of clarification that our local government has rolled back the millage rate 3 out of the past 5 years, that it's actually the assessments that have gone through the roof, and that's our big issue in Clark County. Am I right?
Go ahead.
I'm pretty sure I am.
Try not to.
They rolled back the millage rate, but not a total rollback to match the increase in assessments.
Right, but they
So there
did
has been a tax
reduce
increase.
the millage rate for 3 years out of the past 5 years.
Have they still
That
had
is
to-
correct, but just not to the actual rollback rate.
they still had to advertise a tax increase?
Absolutely, but that's an assessment, not a not rollback. It's two different things.
Chairman Knight.
And I think maybe the comment between our Clark County colleagues is segmenting into my point. I know Clint and I, for a number of years, have talked about this whole property tax issue, and it's an equation. A times B equals C. I mean, it's a millage rate and the assessment value and the property tax. There are many ways to game this. And I think, first of all, I want to say thank you, Noel, for doing this, because I think we're on the right track from a point of view of trying to do something that is central and provide some uniformity across the state that gives some flexibility to meet some local needs. I want to echo what Chairman Blackman said and the hard work that you've done, because we can, with these one-offs, get very much a piecemeal system. And I will remind you that Georgia's a very tax-friendly place, partly because of compliance. We don't want to get so out there piecemeal that we've got different county cities doing different things. That makes it ends up complicating. So I want to say that first of all. I like where we're going with this, but I do want to say that it is a hard thing to do from a point of view of the games that can be played with ad valorem taxes, whether it's with the millage rate portion or in some cases the tax assessment, where you got road tax assessors or values going up. So I think if we can find a way to make sure it's transparent, okay, and to make sure that those games aren't played, either through some really bad tax assessment issues that I've seen go to court, okay, or even the counties having to backtrack and say, hey, we overtaxed or we overassessed. Or the millage rate games. We got counties that will, we rolled it back, but again, their assessment went way up. So that there was a net gain or net increase. I think that's speaking to y'all's issue. So I like where we're going because I like the uniformity of having a general concept here. Let's keep working to try to figure this thing out.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think if we all put our heads together, we can get almost craft a perfect bill. So thank you all for your help.
Representative Crowe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just to highlight this a little bit, I know we've gotten off on the tax part of it, the offsetting of property taxes, but that's not all that it's for. This could be used for other things too, for instead of maybe a MOS for sewer and water infrastructure, things like that wasn't allowed before if you already had a lost in place. So this is allowing some flexibility for all of those depending on what your need is. And I think the real question would be what works for your local jurisdiction. You and your delegation kind of get together with it, and it has to be a meeting of the minds to get it to pass. And so I think it does streamline it some, but then it allows flexibility. Instead of having each community come to us separately as a whole General Assembly, having to pass a bill to let some county do something another county or city can't. This is going to allow that flexibility for each delegation and each municipality or county to work together to decide what they need and utilize that penny for what's best for them. And I think that's where the benefit is working together to figure out what's best going to work in that community.
Thank you. I know there seems like there's still, I mean, for the second hearing, a little question on the flexible penny, is that something a delegation could do under the delegation rules, could pass, and would it force a referendum? That'd be the only one of these, I guess, that is the flexible one, and that would be where you might even want to put the clawback provisions or other triggers in there. It's an interesting concept on whether you could do it that direction. There certainly is a lot of effort for property tax. Seeing as there are you have a question? No more questions. Thank you for your hard work on this. It looks like we've made some good progress and maybe a few questions still to answer, but we'll see you back.
Thank you all for your help.
Thank you. And with that, we're adjourned.